often flying in to meet with Webb and personally oversee the construction. As Siegel gets more deeply caught up in the Flamingo, Virginia pulls back.
Virginia Hill had nothing to do with the Flamingo. She hated the desert. She hated the whole atmosphere. She hated the fact that this garish hotel was being built. She liked the fact her name was on it, but she wanted nothing to do with it. She was very allergic to cactus, so she very rarely traveled to the desert.
Nevertheless, Ben and Virginia are still an item. By December 1945, Esther, fed up, asks for a divorce. At first, Siegel refuses. Though an errant husband, he still clings to the tradition of home and family. With the intense pressure of both Flamingos on his mind, Siegel finally grants Esther a divorce. Siegel now focuses solely on a dream that may cost him everything. By the end of 1945, Siegel stays almost exclusively in Las Vegas. He wants to open the Flamingo the following year, and he's under a great deal of pressure from his creditors, Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano. The building drags on slowly, yet Siegel loses none of his initial enthusiasm.
There was a tremendous shortage of everything. To build anything was complicated, particularly way out there. And people were bidding for steel and whatever. So he had to bid higher, and then he had to pay to have the stuff carted out.
The main challenge of building the Flamingo was Benny Siegel, who couldn't make up his mind about anything. He'd see it one way, then it'd be better this way, and then he'd see this wall, and it should be moved here. And poor Del Webb had to keep changing all the plans constantly.
Ben constantly fights with the East Coast mob as costs escalate. At one point, Del Webb overhears him threatening to knock off someone. When Ben notes Webb's nervous look, he laughs and quips, "Don't worry, Del. We only kill each other." With his nerves on edge, some suggest the constant alterations reveal a growing instability. Others think that Siegel's too shrewd a businessman to put his hotel in jeopardy. Some speculate he may be skimming.
The way Benny Siegel skimmed money was they'd give him $1 million and he'd just pocket half of it and say, well, I had to tear down this wall, or, well, I paid this contractor. And, Lucky Luciano, Frank Costello, those people, Meyer Lansky, they didn't ask for receipts. Benny Siegel didn't have to come back and account for things. They just assumed this was the price of doing business.
I don't think anybody skimmed money from anybody. I mean, anybody who would skim money from the skimmers is pretty stupid. Don't confuse criminality with dishonesty. Many criminals are very honest, and many non-criminals are very dishonest. I'm thinking of lawyers, particularly. No, but Siegel had a reputation for honesty.
In Los Angeles, Chicago-controlled boss Jack Dragna still pushes to consolidate their wire services. But Siegel, wrapped up in getting the Flamingo ready by year's end, unwisely ignores him. Siegel still feels he has the confidence of the New York syndicate, now under Frank Costello, to control West Coast gambling interests. But the unsuspecting Siegel doesn't know there's a spy in his midst.
What Benny Siegel never suspected was that Virginia Hill was spying for the Chicago mob. The Chicago mob sent Virginia out here specifically to keep an eye on Benny Siegel and to move into his racetrack wire operations to find out who his bookies were and how his gambling operations were set up.
To get the doors open by his target date of December 26, 1946, Siegel presses Billy Wilkerson, publisher of The Hollywood Reporter, to loan him $500,000.
So Billy Wilkerson stepped in and gave him the money, and also, as a parting, promised him to bring a lot of stars and to really make it a grandiose Hollywood premiere.
Wilkerson helped Siegel arrange for big band leader Xavier Cugat, comedian Jimmy Durante, and radio personality Rose Marie as the opening bill. Despite her hatred of the desert, Virginia moves into Siegel's private penthouse at the Flamingo in December for the grand opening. Though she first hooked up with Siegel on the Chicago mob's order, there's clearly a passion between them. Virginia also looks forward to the Flamingo's debut as a huge star-studded event. Though it won't be finished by December, Siegel insists on going ahead with the festivities. The hotel's final price tag has soared to $6 million. Siegel needs to get the gambling started.
When they finally got to opening at night, it rained cats and dogs. Half the place wasn't lit, the silverware wasn't there, the glasses weren't ready, and it was just a mess.
2 plane loads of stars came in, from the top to the bottom. I mean, Lana Turner, Joan Croft, all of them. So we were jammed. It was fantastic. The opening was sensational. Stars and lights and glamour and, oh boy, beads and furs and jewelry. It was unbelievable. We did the show the next night. The stars were still there. They left, and we worked to 9 people after that. None of the locals would come. It was something they'd never seen before. They were used to cowboy stuff.
The casino's gambling losses this first week are staggering. Siegel does all in his power to pick up the action, all to no avail. It's later said that the Las Vegas crowd and the Chicago mob conspire against Siegel in these opening months, planning crooked dealers, getting card sharps into play, and spreading the word among locals that the Flamingo is a hangout for potentially violent gangsters.
The funny story about Mr. Siegel and myself was, first week I was there, I was sitting in the coffee shop having coffee, and he was handing out checks for the first week. And he gave me my check, and I said, thank you. I didn't know who he was. And I opened my check, and there was $11 missing. So I went, psst, can I see you for a minute? You know. And I was sitting with one of the dancers, and he went, don't do that. Don't do that. You don't know who that is. I said, there's $11 missing from my check. I'd like to find out why. He said, don't, please don't. Just don't. I'll be all right. I said, look, you took $11 out of my check. I said, I'd like to know what for. He said, let me find out about this. And I said, I would appreciate it. And off he went. I go back to the table, and this Tommy Wonder said to me, do you know who that was? I said, no. He says, Bugsy Siegel. I said, oh. Well, I said, you'll be picking me up in an envelope pretty soon, you know. So he comes back a few minutes later, and he said, were you supposed to be here Thursday night? The opening was Friday. Were you supposed to be here Thursday night? I said, yeah, but it was raining and the plane was grounded. And he said, well, we had to confirm your room, so we laid out $11 for your room. $11 for a room in Vegas, okay? So I said, oh, well, as long as I know what it's for, you know, it's all right, forget it. No, let me see what I can do. No, please. I said, you know, be my guest for $11. I'm a sport, you know. So I got the $11 back, you know, and I think he liked that. I think he liked the idea that I would say, hey, what's going on?
Virginia returns home to her rented house at 810 Linden Drive in Beverly Hills. Siegel stays in Las Vegas. Business begins to pick up. Curiosity lures people out to the desert to see this $6 million gambling palace and resort hotel.
I went to the Flamingo shortly after it opened, and of course I was dazzled by it. Just the idea that this was in the desert was astonishing, and it was a whole different kind of casino. It was big and it was glamorous.
So it got international coverage, and when people wanted to go to Las Vegas, instead of going to Glitter Gulch and some of the cheapy places down there, they went to the Flamingo.
But after 6 months, the hotel continues in the red, with operating losses estimated at $774,000. Ben's constantly on edge. He grows antagonistic towards old friends Mo Sedway and Gus Greenbaum, who manage smaller casinos. In an explosive moment, he fires Sedway, forbidding him entrance to the Flamingo. The head of the New York mob, Frank Costello, orders Lansky out to Las Vegas in May 1947 to find out what's going on. Siegel defends the hotel operations, claiming that it just takes time to get a casino going. Lansky accepts the explanation but pressures Siegel to start turning a profit. When Siegel takes a break to visit Virginia in Beverly Hills, his nerves on edge, they have another raging fight.
Virginia was screaming at Benny outside where everybody in the neighborhood could hear. She was insulting his masculinity. Ben Siegel, who was such a vain man, had always pictured himself as this great lover, and how dare she insult him in public like that. He dragged her into the house, beat her up, and raped her.
We were all sitting around one night in the Blue Room, and the Metro D came over with an envelope like that, and he opened it, and he really looked worried. And I asked Ray Ryan afterward what was in the envelope, And he told me, well, it was from so-and-so in Detroit, warning him not to mistreat Virginia.
But the warning may have come too late for Siegel. He returns to Las Vegas while Virginia plans a trip to Europe. On June 10th, she flies to Chicago on a first leg to Europe. She meets with her Chicago connections, then heads for Paris on June 16th. Back in L.A., everywhere rumblings are heard about Siegel. He antagonizes his own bookies when he insists on doubling their payments to him. When they refuse, he can't help but realize that he's losing his grip over his own operations. On June 20th, 1947, Siegel boards Western Airline Flight 23 for Los Angeles at 12:53 a.m. He lands at 2:30 a.m. and gets a cab to take him directly to Virginia's house in Beverly Hills, where he now stays when he comes to town. Virginia's 19-year-old brother Chick and his girlfriend Jerry Mason, both of whom Siegel knows and trusts, live there. That day, he hooks up with an old friend, Alan Smiley. Unbeknownst to Ben, Smiley has ties to Dragna.
They went out to dinner, had a nice dinner. They went back to the house in Linden, and everything was set up. Alan Smiley was really the inside man that would get Ben Siegel in the right position, open the drapes so he was exposed, reading the paper and everything else. Everything went according to clockwork.
Outside the living room window, just 20 feet away, a plant-covered latticework separates the property from 808 Linden Drive. A man stands behind the latticework, sight unseen. A rifle, resting on the frame, lined up in the sights is the back of Siegel's handsome head, seemingly relaxed and unaware of imminent danger. Smiley leaves the room at approximately 10:45 p.m. to fix drinks. 9 shots ring. The first knocks out Siegel's right eye, driving it 15 feet across the room. The second bullet goes through his neck. 2 other shots hit him, his face shattered.
Benny Siegel never knew what hit him. He was killed instantly.
It's a remarkable piece of marksmanship. They just took his eyes out, which is a kind of mafia thing to do.
20 minutes later in Las Vegas, Mo Sedway and Gus Greenbaum stroll into the Flamingo and announce that they are taking over. They make no mention of Siegel's death, yet no one challenges their authority. The final indignity comes when a morgue photo is published with his name misspelled. In the coming weeks, there is speculation as to who put the hit on the most famous gangster on the West Coast, but no one's ever arrested.
I was home in California when he was murdered. I was shocked. It was terrible.
My father was out of town, and he was upset, of course, because he did know him terribly well, and in this very benign, warm way. I was horrified, on another level, to see that terribly destroyed face that he cared so much about finish up the way it did.
When Benny Siegel was murdered, the police went after everybody. The Beverly Hills police first refused to admit it was a mob hit, and they had all these suspects. All these people confessed to shooting Benny Siegel, because of course, if you're the one arrested for killing Benny Siegel, you're famous for life.
It never went further than that. Nobody was anxious to investigate the murder. He's dead. What's the point? There's no money in it. I believe he was killed because of Virginia Hill, which is a romantic, sentimental way to look at it. You just don't fool around with ladies, I guess.
In 1950, Virginia Hill is questioned about who killed Ben Siegel.
Mr. Kefauver, if I knew anything about it, believe me, I'd be the first one to tell. All I know that he was worried about that hotel, and I hated the place, and I told him, why didn't he leave it and get away from it, because it was making him a nervous wreck.
Years later, it is revealed for the first time by Virginia's biographer Andy Edmonds that the killer is Eddie Cananzaro, a hitman for Jack Dragna. Dragna wants the lucrative wire services, and after getting the okay from the New York syndicate, who wants control of the Flamingo, Dragna orders the hit. Indeed, Dragna does regain his power after Siegel's murder, as the New York mob switches its interest from L.A. to Vegas.
The reason why I know Eddie Cannizzaro was a hitman was for several reasons, actually. Eddie Cannizzaro had done work